I'm about to drive 500 laps around the longest track on the entire F1 calendar. The average Belgian Grand Prix lasts for 44 laps, and in this video I'm going to try not go crazy by driving just over 11 of these. Oh, and if that wasn't enough of a challenge, I'm also trying to get into the top 10% in the world on a controller on a track that almost made me lose my mind. So as you can probably imagine, this first lap was a complete disaster, so we're going to go through it as quickly as possible. To be fair, this was only the third time that I've driven around this track on F1 23, and let's be honest, these two videos are not exactly useful for improving around Spa, and they were also over 2 months ago. Anyway, we're slowly coming up to the end of the lap now, and I think out of the 19 corners on this track, I somehow managed to miss the apex on 15 of them. Now we're coming up to the bus stop chicane, which are the final 2 corners on the track. I just broke way too late for the penultimate corner, and then in the final corner, I basically had to deal with what I had set myself up for. In the end, I set a lap time of a 1 minute 50.2, and I was a solid 10 seconds off the world record. But I knew that I could find so much time if I just cleaned up my lap. And after this, I just kept making progress. After 50 laps, I had gained 3 seconds worth of lap time, but I was only up 10% in the world. However, I honestly wasn't that worried, as it is such a long lap and I just had to keep learning. By the way, here's my 50th lap of this challenge, and I'm so proud of this 360. So it actually took me ages to make my first improvement on my second stint, but on lap 81, coming into the bus stop chicane, I was 4 tenths up. However, I took these 2 corners so much better than I had on my previous improvement, and I doubled my progress, which put me into the top 56% in the world. And I was certain that I could still find time on this stint. So on that lap, I had an awful middle sector, and coming into turn 10, I knew that I could find time. I managed to go from 3 tenths down, and then slowly found time all the way up to 8 tenths up on the exit of 10. And then after going through turn 11, I was almost a second up. So we'll quickly go through the rest of this lap, but as you can see, I was gaining little bits of time everywhere, and I was eventually well over a second up, which was amazing because I knew that I was on for a chance to make a massive improvement. But honestly, I just completely bottled the final chicane by braking so late, which meant that I couldn't get a good exit, and this cost me around half a second. However, this was still a 1 second improvement, so I definitely wasn't complaining, and this was because this moved me up 10% in the world, so I knew that I could still achieve my overall goal. So sadly, I didn't make any more progress in this stint, but to be honest, it was all because I just peaked way too late. Anyway, this was 20% of the challenge done, and I was making some really good progress. But for some reason, in this third stint, I made literally no progress, and I'm not going to lie, I was a little worried because I always make improvements in my first 4 stints. However, I still had 350 laps to go, so I knew that I just had to relax and go again. But thankfully, on lap 167, I was 2 tenths down coming into bus stop, but as we know, I had an awful run through it on my previous personal best. However, this time I had a good run through it, and I gained a small 3 tenths, but these 3 tenths were massive for my confidence. And after this, I made 2 quick improvements, which eventually put me into the top 39% in the world. Even though I hadn't made a massive amount of progress on this stint, this was all crucial for my confidence, and I now had the momentum again. And now I was certain that I could focus on making some seriously big improvements. And to be honest, that's pretty much exactly what happened. Coming into turn 10, I was about 1.5 tenths down, but I tried to stick as close to Jarno Opmeer's telemetry as possible, which unsurprisingly I didn't follow perfectly. However, it did help nonetheless, and after leaving turn 11, I was already 4.5 tenths up. Next up was Prawn, and sadly I can't quite take this corner flat, which I might have been able to in 2020. However, I didn't have to stop accelerating at any point, and this gave me another tenth of a second. And I maintained this all the way to the end of the lap, and this was a massive 5.5 tenth gain. And this moved me up 6% in the world, which was almost as much as I gained in the entirety of my previous stint. So in these 500 lap videos, what you're about to see has literally never happened to me before. And this was where I knew that I was starting to build some serious momentum. So after every stint, I check where I am in the world so I don't have to calculate it whilst editing and then go straight out onto another lap. Well, as you can see here, on quite literally the very next lap, I was making lots of little improvements here and there. Now we're on to the final chicane. Honestly, I took the first part of it really well, but I couldn't quite get exactly the traction that I needed, which ended up costing me about a 10. However, progress is progress, and I was now into the top 31% in the world. So for some reason on this stint I didn't make any more progress, but to be honest I wasn't that worried, as I knew that I could find time in literally every part of the lap, and I had so many laps left in this challenge. But this is where I started to get worried that I wouldn't achieve the overall goal. As you can see, throughout this stint I bottled improving multiple times by taking stupid unnecessary risks trying to follow Jarno's line through the corners. All I was trying to do was find an extra couple of hundredths of a second, which in turn made me invalidate about 10 times. But guess what, so in my last video you may remember me saying this. By the way, a 500 lap video is coming next week, and it is a banger, trust me, I've already started recording for it. Well, when I said this, I was between 2 stints, and these are the stints that you're seeing now. Yeah, I didn't make a single improvement between lap 250 and 350 because I wasn't driving around Spa for a few days and I was just fully out of my rhythm. And to be honest, the most demoralising thing is when you realise that you have to continue driving the rest of the lap after you've just bottled a massive chance at making progress. And by the way, here's the 300 and 350th lap of this challenge. Yep, this was so frustrating, but I decided to do another stint the next day because I was desperate to rebuild some momentum. And on lap 359, I wasn't exactly feeling confidence, but there was only one way to build that confidence, and that was through improving. Going through turn 1, I got such a good exit, which put me over 1/10 up, and I maintained this through Eau Rouge, and then I maintained it all the way to the end of the Camel Straight. So next up was Le Com, and coming through this section of corners, I only managed to gain 6/100ths of a second. However, progress is progress, and I was happy that I was at least finally improving. Next up was turn 10, and throughout this challenge, I found this corner so difficult, and I stupidly tried to follow Jarno's line through here, which as you can see just did not work out. I just went so wide through here, but thankfully I did manage to gain this time back on the exit because of my poor run through it on my previous personal best. Next up was turn 11, and I had a slightly better run through it than my best lap so far, which gained me around another 10th, which was brilliant because I knew that I could still find so much time. And then pretty much the same thing happened through Purim, but this time my run was borderline perfect. And I gained another 2 tenths, and I knew this was a huge chance to make some massive progress. And luckily for me, I managed to maintain this all the way from turn 13 to turn 16, which for me was massive. And this was because I knew that I was finally able to hold my nerve after 2 very disappointing stints that I desperately wanted to put behind me. But now it's time for one of the most crucial parts of the entire 500 laps. Could I hold my nerve? Coming up to bus stop, I momentarily did think that I'd bottled it by running on the grass, but I actually had a really good run through the chicane, and I actually managed to gain a full 10th. This put me into the top 20% in the world, and I was absolutely buzzing because this was a huge jump, and I had proved to myself that I did in fact have the bottle. However, I wasn't going to stop there, and 11 laps later I was a 10th up coming into Le Com with a lot of time to find, specifically in the middle sector. Sadly, going through turn 7, 8 and 9, I did actually end up losing this time, and coming into turn 10 I was only just about equal to my delta. But this time I absolutely nailed the run through turn 10, and I went from equal to my delta to 2.5 tenths up, which was massive. And now it's time for turn 11, and once again I gained another 10th. So I was feeling so confident at this point, and coming up to Piln, I decided to try and take another risk by taking a wider entry to try and maintain a higher minimum speed. And to be honest, I would have improved by even more if I stupidly didn't forget to change up to 7th gear, and I'm pretty sure I just completely forgot. Next I was turn 13 to 16, and coming into turn 13 I was 3.5 tenths up, but I took such a better line through every single one of these corners, and I found myself gaining time in quite literally every corner. This carried on until the exit of turn 16, where I was 3/4 of a second up, and I wasn't sure if I was about to complete my goal with 130 laps to spare. Now it's time for the bus stop chicane, and if we just stop it here, you can see that I ran over the grass for only a second. And as you can now see, I just had an awful run through these 2 corners, and I'm blaming it on myself running over the grass. And now we're coming up to the finish line, and I was only 4.5 tenths up, which is a lot, and it did put me into the top 14% in the world, but I won't lie, I was a little bit disappointed. However, I knew that in the final 100 laps, I would only have to turn up for one of these laps, and thankfully I knew exactly where I had to find the time.
This is it. This is the lap of the weekend.
I had done it. On lap 406 of this challenge, I set a lap time good enough for the top 9% in the world, and I was absolutely buzzing. To be honest, for the level that I drive at, I honestly don't believe that I could have found any more time on this lap. And here's the 450th and 500th lap of this challenge. Thank you all so much for watching. By the way, before you go, I don't want to sound beggy, but I do have one request for you. At the moment, I'm trying to get in contact with EA for creator early access for F1 24. And I get the feeling that they definitely look at subscriber counts when giving out early access, so please consider subscribing.